Hello and welcome to Retired with Electric Car. For many years I worked for the NRMA roadside recovery service, and one of the things that I came across was that many people had bought a brand new car upon their retirement with the hope that the car would last them for as long as they need to drive. Inevitably, the cars do not last as long as people hope, even when they are well cared for, and the cars would start breaking down eventually with fairly serious uh, repair needs that would cost several $1,000s. Often the people at the position of having retired and going down maybe 10-15 years from that point were not in a position to maintain their cars and pay for the services and sometimes expensive repairs. And the question that I was most often asked was, which car is the most reliable? Now, obviously, I don't work for anybody and I don't speak on behalf of NRMA or otherwise. I'm in the retirement and I'm looking at the situation that I need to replace the car we currently have. It's in good condition now, but it is not going to last for as long as I wish to drive. So I was looking into the cars, and the things that commonly go with older cars starts with one of the most common things is crank angle sensor, drive belts, pulleys, water pumps, alternators, exhaust systems, brakes of course, and eventually into the more expensive things like head gaskets or tire engines as the cars get older and wear out. Not only that, there's the continuing issue of paying for your fuel, and especially if you don't drive a car a lot, fossil fuel powered cars, such as diesel or petrol, they are best if they are used reasonable amount. Engines get dirty, nozzles block up, all sorts of issues happen if the car is driven very little. So if you're thinking, well, I'm turning 65, I'm going to retire, I need a car for the next 30 years, well, you've got to think of what's that car going to be like 30 years from today. And this is what made me conclude that there's many advantages in considering an electric car as a car for retirement. Of course, electric cars have many advantages over fossil fueled cars, also often called ICE cars, ICE standing for internal combustion engine. So that takes care of whether it runs on LPG, whether it runs on diesel, or whether it runs on normal petrol, unleaded, whatever. If it's all internal combustion engine, and so we often refer to these cars as ICE cars. So what's the reason why one would consider electric over ICE? Well, there is obviously the environmental issue. There's no question that ICE cars cause toxic gases to go into the air in the areas where people live. I won't go in this episode into the full arguments of why and wherefore, but to think of the simple, very easy example that everybody can relate to. If you are in a garage which is fully enclosed, door closed, windows closed, you would not consider starting your ICE car in that garage if you're in there, because within minutes you would be dead. You would die of carbon monoxide poisoning. On the other hand, if you have an electric car in your garage, you can switch it on and obviously no harm will come to you whatsoever. So that's a very easy way to understand which one's better for the environment. If you consider the planet, well, it's an enclosed space. You might think that it is endless, and certainly years ago people didn't even consider that there's any limit to how much toxic gases or poisons can be dumped into the atmosphere. It wasn't until we had the ozone layer disappearing over the Antarctic that people started thinking, hey, we can't put all kinds of toxic gases into the environment. And we perhaps came to the realization that the atmosphere is not limitless, and what we put in there affects the quality of the air and therefore quality of our health and our life. I'm not even going into global warming because it is hard to prove what causes it, whether it's a natural cycle, whether it's caused by man-made pollution. To me, if I simply think of it, again in a small scale, say a space of a garage, it's fairly easy to see that you put pollution in the air becomes breathable, unbreathable, and it will affect your health and it will kill you eventually if it gets too toxic. So if you take that into account, then the pollution issue I think is very clear cut. Whether that pollution leads to global warming or not, well, each to their own. I think it may well contribute, but I don't really care, to be honest, because what does it matter? Wouldn't you rather breathe clean air than dirty air, irrespective of whether it does global warming or not? I mean, what is the harm to us if we all decide to clean up the air and have clean, fresh, healthy air? Certainly it'll be health benefits to everybody on the planet, but specifically people living in large cities. So air quality, I think, is my personal number one concern for choice, so whether I choose ICE or electric. But then you look at the practical considerations of the car. Electric car will basically not deteriorate over time, even if you use it very little. Let us say you drive only 1 or 2 kilometers a day. Maybe you go to the local shops and maybe it's 1 kilometer each way, you drive 2 kilometers a day. Occasionally you visit some friends or family and you might drive 5 or 10 kilometers. That is not good conditions for internal combustion engine. The engine barely warms up before it cools down again. The oil deteriorates because it doesn't get to normal running temperature. You still have to do your regular oil changes every 6 months, even if you don't clock up many kilometers, otherwise the oil loses its lubricating qualities and you accelerate your engine wear. So for somebody driving very little, internal combustion engine will have much more wear than it would have if somebody drives a car a lot. So if you're thinking of people who are retired, and of course I know there are retired people who decide to go around Australia and they're going to travel non-stop for next 4 or 5 years. We will perhaps come to that again in another episode. But for now, if we consider that you are probably going to drive maybe 5 or 10,000 kilometers a year for the next 20-30 years, does it make sense for you to choose an electric car? Well, a lot of things in the cars, like radiators or exhaust systems, they deteriorate over time. Even if they are not used a lot, they corrode. Transmissions are probably okay. They wear more by kilometers. You can get anything from 150 to 300,000 kilometers from a transmission. Sometimes more. Engines are the same. Don't expect any major repairs until you probably hit about 150,000. You can get minor issues like crank angle sensors and maybe perishing of radiator hoses, things like that. They happen more with time than kilometers. So there's a lot of things that can wear out, but with the electric car you have the huge advantage that the fuel isn't sitting in a tank getting old. Like if you have fuel sitting in the tank, say for 6 months, it's starting to lose its qualities, it starts to break down. If they have the electric car in the garage, you plug it into your own power point in your garage, you don't have to even go to a service station to fill up, and the car is ready to go whenever you hop into it. You come home, you plug it back in, and it tops up over time. And particularly if you drive a little, rather than driving 100, 200 kilometers every day, well, the car can charge very slowly in your garage as one normal power point. It'll slowly top up when you go out. You might use maybe 50 kilometers, you come back and it'll sit again for a few days. So the car is always ready to go. That is a convenience and an advantage. And if you know that you're not going to be driving much more, then also the range of the car, how far does it go on a single charge, is less relevant issue for you. So the range is typically governed by the battery size as well as the battery efficiency and the motor efficiency of the car. If you're driving very little, and that's basically all you expect from the car, then you can buy a car that doesn't have a very long range, therefore the car is cheaper to buy, and you have a good reliable car to take you for all your local shopping, going to doctors, visiting friends, whatever you need. And you don't have to maintain the car in the same way. You need to make sure your tire pressures are okay. So maybe check them every 3 months or 6 months. But other than that, you don't need to do any servicing on your car. And that is probably one of the major advantages of electric vehicle. You're not in for regular service costs, and you don't have to take it in when there's basically nothing wrong with the car. You don't have to just change the oil. You just drive it whenever you want. There are wearable components. Probably shock absorbers may need to be changed depending on the quality of the shocks. Maybe you're looking at once every 100,000 or something like that. You have your ball joints and other wearable connections as far as the steering and suspension. There's bushes and things like that like in all cars will eventually wear out and need to be looked at, but you're looking at servicing maybe every 50,000, more likely every 100,000 kilometers rather than every 10,000 kilometers. And as far as the normal service cost of spark plugs, air filters, fuel filters, oil filters, all these things, they don't. The car doesn't have it. There's no such things to replace. So your ownership over a period of time is gonna be much less expensive, and also your running cost. If you have off-peak electricity in your garage, well, then you can charge overnight while you're sleeping and not using the car, and you're paying about half of the electricity cost to fill up your car. In addition, if you happen to have solar panels or want to put solar panels on your car, well, then you can essentially charge the car from sunlight, and it's good as free to run. So these are considerations over long term, because once you bought the car, you retire, maybe you have super, you have some savings, or even if you buy the car before you retire, you're working, you pay the car off. But once you retire, depending on your circumstances, but let us say that you're reliant on a government pension, then, by the time you pay your things like council rates and, of course, your utilities, your daily living expenses, you don't necessarily want something that is going to cost you a lot of money on regular basis for servicing and running costs. If you're going to travel, you can do it much more cost effectively, and you are less likely to be in for surprises in the large builds. If your transmission breaks down or your engine blows a head gasket, these repairs can be very expensive. And yes, electrical cars also have an expensive component, which is the battery. And the electric cars have been now around, on the mainstream. Tesla's been around for over 10 years. Nissan Leaf's been around for getting close to 10 years or around the same time, and now there are many others. So the technology has become somewhat proven. There are differences in the battery technologies, the rate of deterioration of the battery and so forth, but actual battery failures are very, very rare. Tesla is now talking about bringing out the 1,000,000-mile batteries. That's 1.5 million kilometers before you expect to have to replace the battery. And even then, the battery doesn't actually die on you. It's the range. So if you can say 500 kilometers from a single charge, now maybe in 5 years' time you get 470 or 450. The car still works. The battery just is not quite as able to hold the power over long term. Meanwhile, the battery technology will continue to develop, same as it has with phones and computers and laptops. I remember my first mobile phone, you could use it for 20 minutes without it being plugged in, and then it would have a flat battery. Now the phone will last a lot longer. Before we had the smartphones, like this one recording is on my iPhone, but before that, when Nokia was bringing out the phones, they would last a week between having to need charging. But then, of course, with the smartphones, the phones now do so much more. They record videos, they go on the internet. You can use them as a computer, you use them as a camera. So you play music on them, so the batteries have a lot higher demands on them. But even then, today's smartphone will last you good 10-12 hours of non-stop use, which is much more than the old phones used to be. And you can charge it very quickly. It's in an hour it's charged, and you got another 10 hours. Batteries in the cars have developed in similar way. The old batteries were lead acid batteries, and probably like 100 years ago there were more electric cars, or equal amount of electric cars on the road as there was internal combustion cars. However, the oil companies found that there's a lot of money to be made from selling people a product that they burn. The car companies found there's a lot of money to be made on something that needs regular servicing and eventually has to be replaced because it's worn out. So the internal combustion engine became the preferred choice for both the oil companies and car companies. And the consumers were not well enough educated or even aware that they could have insisted on the electric vehicles at the time. If we had had electric vehicles for past 100 years, I can't even imagine where we would be today, but I'm pretty sure we'd be looking at least 1,000 kilometers on a single charge, and the car would cost a fraction of what the internal combustion engine car costs. Today we are in a bit of a crossroads, that we now have functional electric cars, are good for long distance, are good for long battery life, are essentially maintenance free, and on the other side we have internal combustion engine cars. A Citroen that I'm sitting in now, this one on a trip averages about 4.7 liters 100. It's incredibly fuel efficient. It's the most fuel efficient car I have ever owned, and I cut my fuel consumption maybe to half. If you need servicing every 15,000 kilometers, I remember my first new car that I bought needed servicing every 5,000 kilometers. So there has been huge improvements in the internal combustion engines, in the quality of the cars, in the efficiency, and that is fantastic. But then you look at the other side, there's much more cars on the road. So the old cars were inefficient, they were spewing toxic gases in the air, they used a lot of fuel, but the air was clean and there was a whole planet full of clean air. Now we have very efficient cars, but the air is getting toxic, there's a huge amount of carbon in the air, and the cities, in any major city, you're risking your health walking on a footpath with the cars spewing pollution all over the place. So yes, we have improved efficiency, but we are now at the point where we really need to look at completely stopping the pollution, not just improving efficiency and making the cars more fuel economical. Also, the oil will one day run out. I mean, at the moment we are getting oil by fracking or fossil fuels from underground. We're destroying groundwater. We're doing a lot of harm. It's no longer like it was in the days of Beverly Hillbillies. Those of you who know what I'm talking about. Oil just comes gushing out of the ground. You collect it, you sell it, and people use it for their car. Now it's hard to find. It's got to be drilled from deep underground. Personally, I don't believe it can be good for the planet to dig out all those empty oil reserves from wherever you can find them. And it's eventually gonna end no matter what we do. So if we know it's gonna end anyway, and we have a technology that allows us to travel without use of internal combustion engines, then to my way of thinking, the quicker we move over to that, the better. We have clean air, we have cost-efficient transport, we have reliable transport. Pretty much the only thing that's going to cause your electric car to break down is if you have a flat tire. There are other things that can go wrong, but I'm talking about the likelihood of the frequency of the breakdown versus internal combustion engine cars, especially once the car gets older. Most new cars are good for 100,000 kilometers without any fear of breakdown, and it's actually a factory fault, and it happens very early in the day. When I was doing my breakdown towing, I have towed cars with less than 50 kilometers on the clock which needed a new engine. So these things can happen. It is also possible to buy an electric car, I would imagine, where the battery is somehow faulty or some part of the car is faulty and it completely breaks down within the first 1,000 kilometers or something, and you have to fix. But these things are covered by warranty, and they're not typical. So that's not the decision that's not the grounds for basing your decision on. You look at the overall likelihood. Your car's 10 years old. It's done maybe 150,000 kilometers. You're not in a position to buy a new car because you're retired. Maybe you're now 70 plus years old, and you want to have something that is still reliable, still cheap to keep, still pleasant to drive, and who knows, maybe our emission control laws have changed. Maybe like with the leaded fuel, they will ban internal combustion engines in a decade or so. Well, you don't want to be in a situation where your car now can't be driven because it's no longer legal. So these are long-term considerations for an electric vehicle. There's now quite a range of electric vehicles available, and I will talk about that in the next video, because I think we sort of done the basic of introduction. Why would you consider electric car as an option for your car in retirement? So thank you for listening. I hope that this was useful to you, and maybe you even enjoyed it to some degree. And we will dig deeper into what options you have as we in the future episodes. So signing off for now. Thank you very much. My name is Eric, and I am planning to be retired with electric car. Thank you.